And hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bull Rush. My name is Mr. Schmugeldorf. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Nawabot on my left, Mr. Wolfman on my right. How we doing today, guys?
Doing pretty good.
Really good. I had a fun morning of waking up and watching EULCS, where everything's made up and Fnatic wins the championship.
Or everything's made up and the championship doesn't matter because Fnatic wins.
I mean, it's literally true. Like, Fnatic is going in like 5th and they just 3-1 their playoff. So, go figure.
Whatever, it doesn't, like... Oh, man, but we have Gigantic to talk about, and as, you know, seems to be the tradition week to week, literally nothing has happened in Gigantic this week.
We were doing so well for like 2 months of having stuff to do.
I think
Kind of
it's
connected.
because they're taking the slow rolls right now because of the fact that everything's kind of getting back. Like we're back on track. And it's just like, all right, well, let's breathe for a little bit.
Let's breathe for a little bit. Let's figure shit out. You know, let's wait until, you know, whatever is going on in the background goes on, and we'll get to, you know, regular releases soon. We did have last week. We've had
regular patches.
Patch. Yeah, we've had regular patches. They're just weak.
Well, I mean, I'm not. So, I mean, we never had regular large patches. I mean,
no,
like,
but at the very least, things
earlier
would change, you know, with those big patches. Then they did happen enough for us to continue, you know, for discussion to pop up, not just here on Bull Rush, but you know, throughout the forums, a little bit on the Reddit.
Yeah, well,
though I can't really take any credit, you know. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just how that goes. But we still have things that we do need to talk about, or not really need, but is a good topic of discussion. And right now that is the maps. You know, we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but right now we have this kind of trifecta of maps out right now, where Sanctum Falls was the first map that they made for the game. It's gone over quite a few facelifts since then, but you know, it stands right now as kind of like the main map for the game. When you look at the game, that's the thing that almost everyone identifies the game with, is Sanctum Falls, and it kind of creates a basis of what is, you know, supposed to be good for the game.
Yeah, it's what they consider like it's
the normal. It's the Summoner's Rift, map. You know, it's the normal map, and
which, I mean, to be fair, we should mention that they do have the intention of all the maps being like equally, but you know, we aren't gonna like League of Legends this where it's like, I don't know, we got like Summoner's Rift and 2 other maps that never exist.
Competitively speaking, nobody would want it to just be Sanctum Falls. In fact, actually, you know, you talk to anybody on Renegades, you talk to anybody, you know, on Big, you know, people on Art as well. Nobody wants it just to be Sanctum Falls. Everyone is absolutely loving Siren Strand in the competitive fields just because of the breath of fresh air that it brings in.
Yeah,
let's
I think
be
everyone's
honest.
just getting bored.
They're just getting bored of the other maps.
Bored.
And B,
and it means they're okay with 2/3 of the maps. So just half of them.
Yeah, right. It's really also because Cyrus Strand created a much more of a competitive feel to the game at first, because it was a new map. There's a lot to learn, a lot to theorize on, and there's so many different movement paths and whatnot. And we're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Now that we've actually started playing competitively on it, though, I'm realizing that it has a lot of the same issues that the other maps have in that sense, which aren't issues. It's actually not an issue anymore. It's almost becoming like the standard, where there are specific ways that teams will move across the map, move around the map. They will push certain objectives, have the same type of stuff on the same points. That's what happens, let's be honest. I mean, that's what happens in any competitive game. Some things become strong, but it's starting to put where there's only really 2 or 3 rotational paths or pushes that people will do.
I have actual issues with Siren Strand.
Really?
Yeah. And these are things that, like, the couple times I played on it, you know, it's like, okay, you know, this is decent, and like I didn't have like, I was playing, you know, solo queue, and like, you know, stuff happens, and like solo queue I feel like is always kind of a weird way to feel about the maps, because like you don't do rotations. Yeah, so like right before the show, Wolfie and I were talking about this. Siren Strand resurrected the one map thing that I thought we had gotten rid of out of Sanctum Falls, like back during Alpha, which was, dear God, why are there jumping puzzles again? We all decided that that stupid bridge, or that stupid gap in between bridge and forest on Sanctum Falls was a horrible idea, so they fixed it and they put terrain there, so it's just a ramp now. Like, I started this complaint, like, back in the day, and I'm like, this is stupid. It doesn't help the game. And to be fair, this was back when jumping cost, like, a third of your stamina bar to do, so it was, like, actually really prohibitively annoying. But, like, now you've got things where it's like, during Clash, trying to get into the ship point takes, like, it's like 3 jumps, and if you botch any of them, you have to, like, spend, like, 2 or 3 seconds running all the way back around to the start of the ramp and jumping again.
Honestly,
and then, like, by that point, you burn half your stamina.
Here's the thing. Failing the jumping puzzles is 100% a skill thing, right? Not being able to jump up there is 100% skill, and you do get punished for not having the skill, but here's the thing. It's not the same level of punishment as it used to be, like for Sanctum Falls, where if you fail, you're dead.
It's more than Sanctum. No, it's more than Sanctum Falls was. Because Sanctum Falls, if you fell down that hole, you literally just ran back around. If you fail, like, the second jump to try to get up to ship during Clash, it takes, you, like, burn, like, a good, like, 3 seconds, plus you have to redo all, like, 2 jumps ahead of that.
Yeah. The thing is like...
It's just not fun. It's not enjoyable to screw that up, because, like, it becomes a thing where it's like, if you slightly mistime your jump, you, like, lose your team fight, because, like, it's a 4v5.
I guess
if 2
I
people
have a
miss
different
it, you just
opinion
straight
on
up
it.
Lose.
I guess I have a different opinion on the jumps in Siren Strand because I can actually make them.
Well, I can make them too, but I make them about like 9 out of 10 times.
I get what you're saying, though. It does create that kind of that weird situation where it's like, you know what, we're forcing you to have to use, like Bobo saying, forcing you to use sprint jumps to get to a lot of places in the map. And it's not even just, you know, so you can make the jumping puzzles, you know, you can make the platform jumps from places like Sirens and Barge up to Narwhal or Anchor, or, you know, stuff like that, and in Clash, getting up to ship using the platforms. It's other things as well, like even just getting into the back end of ship, you have to do a sprint jump because the ledge is slightly higher than the height of a normal jump. Same way with the ledge in front of where Anchor and Narwhal move during the Clash. That ledge is slightly higher than a regular jump, so you either have to stand right there and wait for your regular jump to go just barely high enough to get there, or you have to do a sprint jump and whatnot. I understand that that's like, you know, that's weird. You shouldn't be forced to use sprint jump, and Nistus saying, you know,
like, make some of them a super jump thing. Like, I am totally okay with the thing we have on Sanctum Falls, where it's like there's a couple points where it's like you could take the shortcut if you can super jump, but like make it so it's a
you can get up to ship using a super jump. You can get up to Narwhal and Anchor using the super jump.
But
what
like,
I
make
think
it only super jump or not. Like, it's either make it like a ramp or make it a super jump. Like, don't do this weird 50-50 thing.
I think this is where I'm okay with it, is where they go ahead and have done it in such a way where it's like, you have that option. You could go ahead, if you have the super jump, you can super jump up. They said if you don't have a super jump, you could go all the way around through these ramps or underneath the tunnels or whatever. Like, you could do these things to get up there. And then they gave you that third option of, and if you're feeling really good at the game and are really familiar with the map, and you feel like you could just jump up there using these things, go ahead. They're giving you those options, and I think that's why I'm okay with it.
It's not an option. But, like, here's the thing, like,
I'm
a relatively low-skill player. I'm playing with, like, I'm scrimming with you, like, essentially scrimming. I'm queuing with, like, the rest of the big.
You were subbing.
Well, yeah, I essentially subbed in.
Outlandish,
and, like,
thank you
I'm
very
not
much.
I'm not used to making those jumps. And so, like, we were having times where it's like, I'm pretty sure I lost us one of those games because I botched that jump twice in a row, and you guys lost a 4v5. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, you must be this good at jumps to even on a professional, you know, to even sub on a team. And, like, considering there's no way to practice it, it's just like, I'm going to repeatedly botch this. Yeah, I'm going to repeatedly botch this every time I get on Silent Strand.
Well, and even like, then, it's also linked to what hero you're playing as well, too. Because, you know, each hero has different base, like, movement speeds, almost. Like, they have different sprint speeds, they have different movement speeds, and they have a different feel, and also different hitboxes, too. So you have to get used to making these jumps on so many different, like, in so many different ways. Like, you have to get used to the heroes as well. And so I feel like you're right, you know, especially for newer players, that's a rough thing to try and force on people, because now you're forcing newer players to do these. You have to walk all the way around, or else you're going to fail these jumps.
And walking all around is an option.
They're not familiar with.
If 3 members of your team take the shortcut and you go the long way around, all of a sudden you made a 3v, like now you've split the team, which is just innately a bad thing.
That kind of goes into what you were saying, though, a while before, with, that only really matters with rotations. That only matters with your team making a rotation from here to here, and if you want to keep a coordinated team effort, that matters a lot in the competitive scene. You yourself have, admitted the fact that when you were scrimming with us, you felt that you probably had lost to some fights because of your inability to do those jumps, but it doesn't matter.
Or even just know the maps.
Yeah,
even just know the shortcuts.
Yeah, and it doesn't even 100% matter, though, in a casual sense, because there aren't rotations. It's, people walking around. Like, you could point and, you can ping this map and be like, hey, get here, but you're not expecting everyone to immediately stop everything they're doing and turn and run to that like you would for a competitive team.
Well, yeah, but that's just because solo queue right now is really low. So, like, the gap between, like, organized team play and solo queue is really big right now. Whereas, like, if you're talking about, like on the side I've been playing, like, I'll jump in for a quick map of Overwatch. And, like, I've gotten to the point with Overwatch where I know the maps well enough. And, like, I'll get in maps where it's like, I'm like a level 10, and I'll be in maps with, like, level 70s, 90s. And it's like, they know the rotations. It's like, okay, I'm just following you now. And, like, eventually we're going to get to a point in Gigantic where there's enough stratification where it's like, occasionally, you're going to end up 3 or 4, professional players. And it's like, suddenly I now have to play at their level.
Yeah.
And, like, they're like, I may not be in comms with them, but it's like, if they ping ship during Clash, I better be able to do that, or else I just lost this a team fight.
Yeah. I mean, I agree and understand with what you're saying, and it does create that problem for newer players and whatnot, as to where, these super jumps or these just jumping puzzles can cause problems. I don't think they should be removed, though, mainly because I like the dynamic that adds to the game. I like that is something that is put in, because that is a little, micro thing, that there are some people within the competitive community who have been wanting more stuff like this. Not necessarily jumping puzzles, but wanting more way to define mastery of the game, rather than just, I played this for 5 months, therefore I know what I'm doing now. They wanted stuff like that.
My difference between that is, like, I feel like it's one thing if it's like I think, like, Overwatch map design does pretty well with this. Like, there are some, like, shenanigansy spots you can find yourself up to in, like, with, like, certain characters and with certain amounts of, like, skill jumps or, like, rocket jumps. And this is something that's been around since, like, TF2, like grenade jumping, rocket jumping, boosting in CS:GO. Those sorts of things where it's like you can get get your Amani up to, like, some super secret point with a great vantage point, or you can. Like the boost point in Sanctum Falls, where you can get up to the balcony that leads you back to the Guardian. Like, those sort of things I'm okay with. I dislike anyone where it's like everyone, like, this is the primary way to access a thing. Like, I'm okay if it's like, here's a, like, out of the way shortcut that you can use to, like, stealth into the point. That's like for assassins to get in and out.
If it's, but it's like, the main entrance.
Like these are like ship both before and after Clash. The main entrance requires some, like, shenanigansy jumping puzzles.
Yeah, that's I think is the big deal. Is these are the main entrances for a lot of these points. So that being said, they fixed this on Sanctum Falls by just getting rid of that jump and making it a ramp. Now, how would you almost do the same thing on Siren Strand? I mean, with what you're saying, like having these jumping puzzles being kind of back entrances or side entrances that you could take to be a shortcut, you would almost have to redesign large sections of the map to be able to utilize that properly. So, would you almost think... Here's my question, I guess. Would you think that this turns Siren Strand into a much more competitive or high-level play map, and that's just where it's going to be, because not just because of the difficulty of jumping, but also because of the difficulty of the map?
No, I don't think it actually changes. Like, I don't think it makes it a higher tier map.
Okay.
Innately, because, like, yeah, like, if everyone's equally bad at doing those jumps, then it just becomes a crapshoot on whether or not you made it up safely. Like,
But that's not the case, though, obviously. You know, there are people that can make those jumps on a pretty consistent basis. I mean, you watch the RNG VODs, you watch Biggs VODs.
If we assume the matchmaking is good enough that, like, I'm roughly going to be, like, you know, for someone like me that plays, I don't know, like, you know, 2, 3, 4 games a week or so, like, you know, if I'm doing something like that, then I'm in a scenario where I'm not necessarily... if the matchmaking is good, I would end up in matches mostly with other people who are about my level of skill, who may or may not be able to make the jumps. And, like, okay, then we just assume we're going to take the safe path. But, like, right now, the matchmaking is, like, half of the time I'm in games with, like, people that have been playing for 2 years, and it's like, oh, okay, then, like, 3/4 of my team knows what they're doing, and I'm
and not even so much, you know, people who've been playing for a long time, but just have played a lot. You know, you're playing up against, you know, or with people on Big, or, you know, newer players that play, you know, 2 or 3 games a day, or, you know, people like me and the other members of Outlandish and whatnot who will play 8 to 12 games a day. You know, you're talking to people, you know, you're playing with these people who just are intimately familiar with the maps. You know, that's when you get those issues kind of showing up.
Yeah. I was like, we've, like, blocked out Wolfie.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm enjoying myself.
How do you feel about Siren Strand?
I mean, I think Siren Strand is a great map. Like we said earlier, I feel like a lot of the favoritism comes from the fact that it's just still very new and fresh in the eyes of both competitive and casual player. You know, it's just something. It's nice to see the diversity of all 3 maps, and the fact that there is something special about each one of them. I wouldn't say that it's such a huge deal, the fact that these things exist, the jumping puzzles, because though it does have this amount of, like, skill cap requirement, it shouldn't be something that is necessary to do just to be able to play properly. Because, like Perry said, there's a number of times where if you don't make the jump, or if you get pushed out of that way and then all the way back to the beginning, like, you have to spend time and stamina to be able to get back into the fight. And that's not something that players want to have to deal with. That's something that they're just going to get frustrated by. And
exactly.
It's a different level of frustration than, like, getting bursted down or losing a fight or losing a game. You know, it's just like those things happen. When you miss a jump and then get forced out, or when you miss a jump and then go back, try it again, and then you get forced out, and then you go back and try again, and suddenly your team is probably already lost the fight, and if they haven't, you can't really contribute because you've just spent so much time getting there, and you have nothing to really bring. You know, I would be fine if there were a few jumps on the map that had that requirement, like the one that goes into ship, from the outside point right into the middle, and like maybe the one that's in the middle of Sunken, from that ramp on the outside right into the middle of the, like right into the middle of the map where that opening is on the left that goes down into the iceberg, and then the right there's 2 openings that go underneath ship. I think that would be okay to keep.
Actually, I just realized, Erson, in my mind, doing these sorts of, like, jumping puzzle things should be similar to being able to dash over walls in League. It's something that, like, if you're good at it, like, yeah, it'll let you steal objectives, it'll let you take shortcuts, it'll let you do all of these sorts of things. But, like, it's also the thing where it's like all 5 members of our team need to be able to dive over this wall. It's a, like, 1 or 2, you know, our assassin and our, you know, and, you know, our, I mean, jungler in League, but, like, we're not going to have those in Gigantic, really. You know, they need to be able to jump over, you know, swipe the objective and jump back out. And, like, that's a skill that, like, somebody has. It is, like, a boon to your team if you have, like, 1 or 2 people that can reliably do it. Yeah. But it's not like everyone on your team is expected to be able to go over this, you know, to dash over this wall. And, like, if your character doesn't have a dash, you're screwed.
Yeah, and the problem with that is there's 2 problems with that, actually. One is the fact that it's hard to implement that kind of mechanic in this kind of game just because verticality is a factor and should be something that requires an amount of skill.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's the thing is, and Siren Strand has 100%, introduced this kind of growth of this mechanic where the proper use of verticality, like you said, Perry, is very much similar to being able to do diving over walls or taking shortcuts on maps like that in MOBAs. And it does, I feel like, come back to that same issue we had before where the right hand isn't talking to the left hand. Verticality was something that the map designers weren't necessarily talking to, A, players, or B, people designing the heroes. And so they've created these things that, instead of kind of accentuating your ability as a player or your hero's ability to do things, has turned into the main ways to move around the map. So what I would say, obviously we're going to have to live with it for Sirens for a little bit, for a little while. And they can try and do some changes.
Most beta map.
Yeah, and they can try and do some changes to it and whatnot. But what I think really would be prudent is, since obviously they're probably still working on more maps, from what Motiga has said before and what they've stated previously, is that they are always working on new maps. 3 maps is probably not their planned amount of maps.
Sure.
So what we can hope is that in future maps, they will keep these sorts of things in mind, and verticality will become that same sense. Because I feel like out of all of the base kind of like core mechanics that make Gigantic different than anything else on the map, verticality is one of the most important, and it just so happens to be the only one that isn't being utilized as properly as it should be.
And that's 100%. Like, that's the number one thing I always feel like when I come back to Gigantic after playing like a match on Overwatch, is like Overwatch, I have to think about like, oh, is like there's somebody in the air behind me. Oh, is maybe if I have some ability that I can use to get up onto this like overpass that I can then use to jump down onto somebody or something like that. Like that's all like I think about verticality in Overwatch. In Gigantic, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I have to jump up these like stair steps now.
Yeah.
I think the point that Perry's trying to get across, and that I'm agreeing with and also trying to say, is that verticality is an option, and it should be something that adds an advantage, not something that should be required to perform well. And that's the problem, is because, like we've said before now, you have to make those jumps to get into ship, or to get into mid, or to get into sunken from that ramp, or to get up that path back up to anchor if you don't want to take the ramp because it's faster. If you want to perform well, you have to be able to do that. And I feel like that really shouldn't be a thing. When you have characters like Beckett, who has the jetpack, or Taito, who has swoop, Margrave, who has leap, Wu with splash kick, Sven with super jump, there are a lot of options to help other players that don't have that skill requirement. And that's good, that's great. But when it becomes essential to the point of either you need to be able to trust your teammates to be able to make those jumps by themselves to have a proper team fight, or force your hand and use certain heroes that can aid others. I don't want to be forced to play Sven just because I might have a few people on my team who can't make those jumps.
Yeah.
I want people to be able to do everything that they can and get better at it. And it comes down to the point of, like, the wall jumping was such a perfect example. I never would have thought of that. Like, thank you, Perry. When people that can do the wall jumps in League, like, that gives you an advantage. It's not a requirement to do well. And that's the
verticality
problem.
Should provide advantage, but not a penalty if you can't.
Yes.
If you don't, you should have an advantage for running people with super jumps and running people with high mobility, but you shouldn't be penalized for running a team without them.
And
Because
the
a
thing
lot of
is,
these
It's
Like, if you
nowadays
if you made
where it's not even. Sorry, am I like completely running over a thought here?
let me finish real quick. So essentially, if they made it so ship like you had like the back entrance point that's just a ramp, like if it was like you either take the ramp or you can take the shortcut and super jump up into it, then it would be like now we have to balance: do we take like a squishier team or like try to synergize with a Vodin or a Spin, or do we just all go around the other way?
Yeah, I think the thing is that, right now, I still don't even feel like people are being penalized for, not taking something like a super jump on the team, because the big problem is inherent to the map. It's not, the teams that are having a problem, it's the map. The places where verticality gives you an advantage aren't even giving you an advantage because there's always other ways to get up there. Like on Sirens, yes, this goes back to, being able to make the jumps, but like ship during Clash, it's a vertical place, but that doesn't give you an advantage because you could just jump up there using the paths. It doesn't do that. There are a lot of situations in this game where that's the case. On the maps we have, verticality doesn't give you an advantage. Being able to jump vertically or have super jumps on your team doesn't give you a huge advantage because, super jumps are useful, but either A, there are a lot of heroes that don't need super jumps. They have abilities or, like Wu with his right mouse button or Margrave with the leap or Taito with the swoop, abilities to get places outside of having a jump pad or a super jump pad very quickly, or there's just another way to get there, or another way to get somewhere close there where you can cut off the movement.
See, and I don't think that's a bad thing, just because I would disagree with the fact that it doesn't give you an advantage, because it does, but it's only temporary, and that should be the case. When someone can get up to a point that gives them a high vantage area, or some place that it takes a few seconds for someone else to get to push them away, like, it's a temporary advantage, and that should be the case.
Yeah.
A big problem that we've had before is that, sometimes we still have it, but I haven't really seen people do it just because I think there was like a mutual agreement that there's a high pillar on both sides in the Guardian Arena on Canyon, on Ghost Reef, where you can get up there with a super jump or a leap ability, like with Sven or Vodin, and then you can shoot down on the wound and no one can touch you because that mesa's like, the ring is wide enough for you to, like, stand
if you're in the middle, you don't
avoid.
have angle.
Yeah, like, you can't get pulled unless you step too far forward. You can't get hit by projectiles. Like, that's not fun to counter against, because if you don't have someone that can get up there, or, like, someone notices too late, like, that's a free wound.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of advantage is way too much. When there's advantages that get you in a position like the window in ship during Clash, like, yeah, they can jump up or they can walk around, but it takes a minute and it's an easy access thing. You shouldn't have to be stuck in a position just to get an advantage.
And the thing is, it helps honestly, it helps make solo queue better. Because, like, right now we're in a situation where it's like, if I'm like, oh yeah, I can get up here. Like, if it's a super jump, it's like I have to burn an ability to get up here. It's like I immediately think, like, wait, the rest of my team doesn't have this ability. Where it's like, I know, for example, that, like, I'm trying to think, like, Vidasi doesn't have a super jump. So it's like, I just accept it, like, oh, if I've got a Vidasi on my team, I can't, we can't all take the super jump path unless we have a Sven or a Bone. If we're talking about a situation where it's like, you have to make this series of, like, 4 crazy jumps to get there, it's like, I'm like, well, I can make it, so I certainly hope the rest of my team can, because that's the route I'm taking. And if somebody else can't, it's like, well, fuck.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the best examples of how verticality is being used properly, and it kind of goes back to Sanctum Falls, because obviously it's been around the longest,
It's
and
polished.
it's been, exactly, it's polished, is the areas outside of Statue and Bell, with the walkways up top, it doesn't take a long amount of time to get up there. There are ramps, there are steps to get up to those pathways that you can take. Anybody can take those normally, but people with super jumps, people with these jumping abilities can get up there quicker and utilize that to their advantage. Very, very similarly to people in League of Legends or Dota being able to go through walls or jump over walls and whatnot. That's exactly what I think is exactly what you're talking about, is like how it should be done. It's a temporary boon. It gives you the ability to move around this area quicker and possibly lose your opponent because maybe they can't make that jump. Maybe they aren't as skilled as you, or don't have that super jump ability on cooldown, or just suck at making the jumps up. Maybe they just have to take the ramp, or whatever. That gives you that extra couple of seconds of time to where you can get out.
Well, and I think it's also a matter of it makes things like knocking people back out all the more valuable. Like, for the example, like with the Mistforge balcony, it's like I've had times where it's like I have like a, I was thinking up there of HK and like everyone jumps up onto the balcony
stage,
like with a super jump, and I'm like, mortar, and it's just like, yes, like I successfully pretty much stopped this push because like they don't have another super jump. Whereas like if it's just like you jumped at, it's like, okay, now I just got to run around jump. It's like, oh, okay, like I just did a really cool play for, it saved like 5 seconds.
And you could kind of do the same thing on Siren Stranded's ship at Clash, where, they're making the jumps on the things. I've done this multiple times on HK, where they will try and jump to get into stage from the jumping path, and I'll mortar them in the face, and they'll fall off, And I've stopped a Taito focus doing that, He was focusing, I hit him with the mortar, and it knocked him into the air. You could still use Taito's focus in air. There are a lot of people, in solo queue that don't know that, but he used the focus, and he was midair, a little bit to the right, and he hit the wall with the focus, because I mortared him off. So, you could do that there, and yeah, it does. It creates that kind of like, yes, I just did a play. On Siren Strand up at ship, it's not as huge, because, you could kind of just walk around, but I agree with you, at the Secret Tunnel balcony, or Secret balcony for Mistforge, which is Siren Sanctum Falls, being able to knock them out of there,
used to the names.
Right? To be able to knock them out of there, like, that does stop a push. If you're positioned properly, if your team's positioned properly, and if the enemy team is, meh, then they're going to go ahead and be like, oh, we can't go through here. Now we have to go through the center, but, now their entire enemy team is in the way. Like, god damn it. So, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of mechanics in the game that I'm not too very fond of. I don't want to go off on my poison tangent again because Shmoo heard that, and
hey, we had the poison salt already.
Yeah, but
does poison still slow? I haven't checked.
No, but poison does the whole healing reduction thing, and nobody likes that. At least the way it
doesn't slow you anymore. God damn it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I wanted. I was talking earlier before the show started. I was like, I want to make like a list of like my top 5 favorite mechanics in the game and my top 5 least favorite mechanics in the game. And I've come to realize that there are a lot of things that I like, but there are a lot more things that I dislike.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just gonna make it into a top 10 dislike list.
The salt list.
And I think a lot of this comes back to, and like this is I'm going to keep harping on this because like this is the consistent problem that I think Gigantic has is there's a lot of mechanics that feel like the left hand didn't talk to the right hand.
Yeah.
So you've got things where it's like, guys, we buffed healing. Healing's finally viable again. Vidasi's going to be a good character to heal with, and then it's like, oh, except for like the fact that 4 people have poisons that like completely annul anyone having healing abilities. It's like,
well, and the annoying part is like, there are a lot of heroes that have, like, a lot of the DPS heroes have one of the talents where you are immune to weakness and daze. You're immune to weakness and you get out of daze quicker. There are a lot of DPS heroes who have that talent, so you could go ahead and say, hey, look, they're going to be able to, say they're running a Vidasi or they're running a Wu that goes the weakness builds. You're like, damn, I am going to lose a lot of my damage. Let me take this talent to... I am going to be losing my Shredder perk because it is, or my Dominator perk, depending on what that is, or hero you're playing. You lose one of those two, so you do lose damage output, but at the very least, you don't lose more. And that's the thing, because maybe I don't have 30% armor penetration. Fine, whatever. I'm not getting these 65% damage reductions that Wu could put on me, or I'm not getting the 40% or more damage reductions that Zenobia is putting on me every time we fight, so I could still do damage. But there isn't one of those for healing. There are I mean, to be fair, there aren't that many people that have poisons compared to people that has weaknesses. There are a lot of people that have weaknesses, and so that talent is almost necessary because of that. But poisons, there's only, 2 people that can really have poisons being used effectively for reducing healing, like Vodin really being the only one that does it really well. So it's not like there's a huge problem where everyone has poison, so all healers have to have a talent capability that instead of getting the 10%, healing for that talent upgrade path, they could go ahead and say, you don't take any healing reduction penalties. That doesn't need to be there, but it's kind of sad that there isn't something like that because of how poisons aren't working.
Yeah.
The way that they should be working. And I don't know, if they've changed poisons to work the proper way, like Doug is saying, working as intended, which hopefully is poisons reduce the amount of healing you take in rather than output.
Yeah. It should be...
even just
poison reduces
get rid of
incoming
it.
healing.
Like, poison shouldn't even reduce incoming or outgoing anything. It should just be taking damage.
The problem with that is the fact that if they did that, then poison wouldn't be any different than burn. The difference right now is there are currently 3 damage, I guess 4 damage over time debuffs. There is burn, which just does damage. Burn does damage. Bleed does damage over time and ignores armor. Poison does damage over time and reduces outgoing healing for some strange reason. And the last one is frozen, which is damage over time and slows. So it's like, if poison just did damage, there'd be no reason to have it. The difference is...
It's thematic.
Yeah,
it's thematic. But it's...
Well, and like Doug said as well, is like there's no other counter to healing right now other than Vidas or Zenobia, and that's it.
I don't mind that poison reduces healing. I mind the fact that it reduces outgoing healing.
Yeah.
Which is a bug, right?
Yes. It should reduce incoming healing. That's what it should be. Because the difference, I went off on this so hard. If you poison Vidasi, with the recent nerfs that she's had, we're pushing her back into the support, like, full healer mode. If you poison Vidasi, that's like 6 to 10 seconds of her having 50% reduced outgoing healing, and you don't even have to poison anybody else. I think it's more of a skill for the enemy team if they individually poison enemy players, and then Vidasi heals them for less just because they're poisoned.
Yeah, or attempt, it'll still be strong because obviously Vodun will still be able to put Contagion out and have poison on pretty much the entire enemy team if he uses it properly. But it does create that mechanic where you're mostly going to be thinking, okay, if I go into this fight, what person are we going to be focusing? They've got an HK as their main damage dealer, okay, we're going to be focusing on the HK. Get him down quick so we can win the fight. So how are we going to... But they've got a Vidasi on their team. Okay, poison the HK. If we poison anybody else, great. Poison the HK though, because that's who we need to get. So, I agree with you saying that they probably that would be a better way of doing it, and that's specific to poison. And that's the thing though. It goes back to healing being almost uncounterable with the exception of poison, but there, even with Vidasi, not being the healer that she is. There's no real good healing character beyond Vidasi in the game. Like, Sven's heal is solid, but it's a burst heal, right? It's not something over time. There was somebody I remember on the Reddit who was trying to make the point of, oh, wow, Sven has a lot more healing than Vidasi because, if you hit it on a lot of people and then they all stand there, obviously they're going to get a lot of healing. I don't know anyone's going to stand still.
It's hard enough to hit it on one person.
The thing is that's the reason as to why it was turned into a burst healing. This was something that happened back in Alpha. This was an Alpha discussion with the devs. Hey, put the healing on Sven's flask up front. Why? Because no one's standing in that shit. It's super small, and no one wants to stand there.
Yeah, because it's like, I gotta hit my skill shot, and then they have to not be moving.
Yeah, it's garbage. So, right now, the healing in the game is super weird.
Even if you go on Sven the full healing route and you have, like, healthy glow, that's still only 30 a tick for 10 seconds, and only if they're near allies. Yeah, that's 300 healing, but over 10 seconds. You know, a lot can happen in 10 seconds in this kind of game.
Yeah.
A lot
Dude,
can
2
happen in
seconds is a
3
long
seconds
time.
in this kind of game. You know, I don't think that... I think it's more of the feeling that you can have ways to reduce healing, but it doesn't feel like it's that big of a threat in the game at the moment to really make it that...
The only time that
worrisome.
reducing healing was ever useful was, number one, in the patch where Vidasi's healing was bugged, where you could just infinitely be healing for the max orb amount, because the orbs weren't eaten every few seconds. Like, boom.
It's so dumb.
Like, that was dumb, and because you could heal multiple people for like 300 a tick for infinite periods of time. And then, you know, you had the way long ago patch with Vidasi where the 3 orbs, one, could be put up instantly and would heal for 400 a tick. It was ridiculous.
The history of Vidasi is just a fun history of her being accidentally bugged into being good, and then they fix the bug and she goes back to being awful again.
Yeah, and then, you know, the one thing that we see a lot of, and this is a problem with Vidasi more than anything else, is Vidasi is, her core premise is to be a healer. That's what her core premise was. But we've found time and time again that if she can't do anything else effectively, you know, if she can't do damage effectively, if she can't debuff the enemies, if there aren't other things that she can do beyond healing, she's just not worth it. Because her healing, while useful, is never enough. You need to be able to do more than healing. And that's a problem with Vidasi more than anything else. Because Sven doesn't have that problem. Sven has a lot of debuffing ability. He has a lot of damage potential. Let's look at Aisling. Yes, she has the heal, so she's got a little bit of healing, but she's a melee. She's a bruiser. She's a brawler. Or you could go ahead and build, you know, more range and go ahead and get the ranged upgrade with Spectral Wave and do a whole bunch of debuffing with Kador. She has a lot of utility. Vidasi doesn't have any of that. Unless, you know, and she did in the last patch because she had the sniper, you know, fireballs, which didn't make any sense, but whatever. You know, and, you know, Almighty saying, you know, with the debuffs or crit buff on the E, like, yeah, but we don't use the E to do that. I don't know any Vidasi that thinks, hey, let me go into the enemy team so I can use my E, reduce my health by half of it, so that way I can put burning on them.
Yeah.
I don't know any Vidasi that wants to lose health to go and do that. You know?
Well, he was saying that burning with the projectiles with the Flame Seeker upgrade, which just got the crap nerfed out of it. Because, again, got accidentally buffed into being actually viable.
Yeah.
Vidasi's a weird character, and this has been discussed so many times. Like, either Vidasi is going to be too strong, or there's a lot of characters that are like this, actually. They're either going to be too strong or too weak, and it's really hard to figure out exactly where the balance point happens. Because we've seen this happen with Margrave, we've seen this happen with Aisling, with Taito and Trip, and Zenobia, and Nasus. You know, like, there's so many characters, like, even Griselma. Like, it's hard to find those specific points. Like, balancing is so difficult, and I have so much respect for the people who try to balance. It's a hard thing to deal with, but right now, I think that Vidasi's going to be in a weird place for a long time.
Yeah, and people, you know, Sloppy and Mighty going on and saying that you could stand in your ranged DPS and buff them or debuff them. The thing is that's almost an afterthought. At least when I play Vidasi, I don't know about anybody else. To me, it's like, hey, I'm going to be standing in the back lines of my team anyway. Might as well get my upgrades to buff my team. Your core premise, though, is still, I need to use these abilities so I can heal more. If I go ahead and buff my allies while I'm doing that, great. But I don't think there's anybody that's actively going and saying, okay, I'm not worth it as a hero unless I can stand next to my ranged DPS and buff them. No. No one's thinking that. Everyone's thinking, I'm not worth it as a hero. I'm not worth it as a player for Vidasi unless I'm actually able to heal my teammates properly.
Honestly, like I really don't want Gigantic to just go around ripping off other games, but like Vidasi should just be Mercy from Overwatch,
where she just sits on this individual.
No, she high power heal or a damage buff. Like they're both and like so it's like okay, we got our Voden. I'm gonna go damage buff our Voden.
Or like, you could go ahead and make it so that your left mouse make your left mouse button do this instead. One of your first upgrade paths is you either buff the left mouse button healing, or you change it to a damage beam instead. Get rid of her healing entirely if you want to, and make her a DPS hero.
Yeah. But don't make her. We don't have enough supports already. Like, she's the only like.
We have a lot of supports. We just don't have a lot of healer supports.
That's actually fair. And as long as bloomers keep being like oppressively good healers, I don't.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think Vidasi itself is an issue, and I think it goes into, like you were saying, the big problem being that all in all, healing is still something that needs to be worked on. It goes along with those things where Motiga just, I feel like, hasn't figured out how Vidasi is supposed to work, or how healing should work the best.
There are a lot of characters that, like, I think they just need a full redesign, and I don't think we're going to get there, but it feels like Gigantic has just come such a long way from where it was originally, and, like, hero design is just the one thing that hasn't updated.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of things that need to be done.
While Guthrie's still here, I want to talk about the thing that was brought up, I think, last night or 2 nights ago. Fucking, why is Wu's splash kick and Taito's swoop just so retarded? It is so...
In what way?
It's so easy to get out of a bad position with both of those abilities. It's so fucking dumb. I hate both of those skills. And the fact that there are upgrades that allow them to reset both of those abilities
or use them twice.
It's so dumb. Like, Taito can break crowd control. He gets a huge amount of distance, and it's almost instant travel with a mass amount of burst damage at the end for anyone that's around him.
Yeah.
And let's add in Wu's splash kick. Like, you get a huge amount of airtime. You can reactivate to go super fucking far if you tilt it correctly. And it can do some pretty good damage. At the very least, breaks their armor, and then you can do more damage. It's just so free. It's so free to get out of there. And I don't mind that because it's the fact that they're assassins. It's more of the fact that it has such a low cooldown, and you can't really do anything to stop it. Not even just
that it's such a low cooldown. It's just that, yeah, they're assassins and they should be able to get out, but they have a get out of jail free card for literally every single engage, no matter what happens. If they really wanted to, it doesn't matter what the enemy team does. It doesn't matter how much lockdown you try and put on them, unless you burst them down and fucking, like, stun them for 4 seconds straight. Then they get a get out of fight free card. You know, Wu can get in.
Even if you do stun them,
that's the thing. It's like
Wu and Taito's RMBs respectively. Yeah, they are both RMBs. Like they break stuns. Like they have that upgrade that breaks stuns.
I think they can. That's but
the
like,
really silly part is like there should be a counter to mobility. It should be ECC, and not having that be a thing is just absurd.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't play Assassins. So what I'm going to say is completely ignorant. But I don't think people take those upgrades, like, 100% of the time, usually because the other upgrade paths generally give you more. Like,
because for the most part, people are bad at CC.
The
Like,
thing
it's for
is,
the most
like,
part, like, CC is rare.
watch
and,
Failco.
like, not
Failco's a good example. She plays Taito a lot. On her swoop, she doesn't go the stun break path on it. She goes for the assassinate on it. Because
that's the thing, though. You don't even really have to, because right now I think it might also be a bug. But if you R&B, like, you're out of stun. Like you don't need that upgrade right now, and I'm pretty sure that's been a bug for at least a month and a half now.
I mean,
but it's so dumb. It's just, it's fast, it's instant cast, and you go so far with it. Like, mobility is fine, but crowd control should counter mobility, and right now it doesn't. Like, that is why I don't like those two abilities.
Here's the thing. This is why I'm not 100%. Like, now that they've made the change, I don't know if the reduction of the stun duration on Margrave was a 100% good idea. Because at 2 seconds, yes, it felt really strong. And if you were a ranged person and you got hit by that, holy god, you were going to get fucked. But if you were a Taito or Wu, you also were equally as fucked, and you actually had to try to get out of those things. Now, I don't give a damn if fucking Margrave stuns me and I'm Wu or Taito. I just get out. And that's making me, as a team captain, trying to think up these, comps and strats to make me feel like I don't even want Margrave because he can't do his job and he's not good enough in a team, in that team comp anymore because he can't even get around the map quickly enough for it to work on it. So let's screw Margrave. Let's do the assassin builds. Why? Because it works.
Yeah. And here's the thing, people don't take the anti-CC upgrades because there isn't enough CC to make them worthwhile. If we started seeing reliable heavy CC and it was like the hard counter to Taito and Trip, then everyone would just start taking them.
No, and here's another thing, freaking Mighty being in a, like Voden's Focus, why Voden's Focus is great. It's an AoE root. That doesn't root! Anyone, literally anyone, can dodge out of the root. Like, not just dodge before it happens. Like, Taito could go ahead and do his dodge and swoop move inside of it, so that way he could just leave it. Fucking all mobility skills work while you're rooted, so, Wu or Taito could just use their right mouse buttons and get out of it. Margrave can leap out of it. Everybody can just get out of the Voden Focus. That's just Voden Focus just being stupid right now. I'm sorry, if you're rooted, you shouldn't be able to use movement abilities. You should be able to use them, but you shouldn't go anywhere. You should be rooted.
Completely. I completely agree. I think the Margrave change was justified, but not required. The stun did last a bit long, and it made sense because you're this giant fucking armored beast and you just slammed the ground. Like, yeah, of course I'm gonna stun people, because that's like
what happens.
It makes sense. It was more of an answer to the fact that Margrave is currently the only tank that we can play right now, and he did bring a lot of crowd control. He still does, like, sometimes, if you can get the right landing. It's just the answer to the solution was to make more tanks, and instead they nerfed the only tank they have, and now he feels like he's worthless. So now everyone's running these double or even triple assassin comps, or these double or triple support comps, and
because all the viable CC is Griselda, who has problems already, Nasus, who is okay but
not viable and competitive.
Margrave, who just got all of his CC nerfed, and I'm trying to think who even we got people with displacements around,
Zenobia.
But actual hard stuns.
Slows are ridiculous.
Yeah, you got people with slows, but
here's the thing: slows and cripples are really solid right now.
Yeah,
let's be honest, slows and cripples will do their job, but even then, they don't 100%. They don't even at all affect mobility abilities. So you could cripple Taito, but he can still swoop. You could cripple Wu, but he could still right mouse. But it doesn't matter, And that's the thing. It's like there needs to be some way where CC affects your ability to use movement abilities. And right now there isn't. If you cripple somebody, they should have reduced movement on your on your movement abilities, like swoop.
And this whole thing started when the change to interrupt happened, where it didn't.
It didn't interrupt movement abilities anymore.
Like it didn't interrupt anything. Like it stopped your channel, but like
that affects what, Mozu?
Yeah, like
Mozu, Vidasi.
Like, I'm not saying interrupt is worthless. Like, it's definitely
like, Vidasi, it doesn't matter.
It's still good. Like, I like interrupting something that feels like a Taito blade dance. Like, yeah, you interrupt that, like, that's really good. But the way interrupt used to be was like a mini stun where it stopped what you were doing and you were flinched, like, in place for a good quarter of a second. Like, now if you interrupt someone, if Taito leaps and then you interrupt him, or Taito swoops and you interrupt him, like, okay, cool, he's still gonna go there. Like, the ability won't technically finish, but he's still moving. You know,
like, say with slows, it's like, yeah, you could slow Taito, and yeah, that'll let you potentially, you know, catch up to him, unless he just jumps away, and then it's like, oh, well, he's slow, but really far away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the difference with the fact that the interrupt used to stop momentum, and now it doesn't. The abilities do stop. If you interrupt Trip mid-kick, she's still moving, she can't kick. That's fine. Like, she can't kick, that's fine. But she should halt where she is, because if she can still get to where you are, like, yeah, she lost a ton of burst, but she's still in your face, like, slashing you, and if you don't have a way to get away from her, like, that's it. You know, it's Margrave leap. If you interrupt or daze the leap, yeah, the spell stops, but he's still moving. I don't like that. You know, he still gets to where he needs to do his job. And
I think here's you know, the thing obviously we're going to be drawing with is that CC itself is, like you said, supposed to be the counter to mobility, and it's not right now. And that there needs to be an adjustment to either the CC system or to just certain heroes for that to do its job. You know, Trip is actually properly affected by stuff like cripple and slow, because none of her abilities other than the teleport ignore cripple effects. You know, her Q gets affected by cripple effects, so if you cripple her, she feels crippled. But lunges aren't affected by that, so Taito and Wu don't give a flying fuck if they're crippled. They can just leave. So things need to match over with that. Things need to work properly. And
things
right
just
now,
don't behave consistently.
Exactly. That's the big deal. Things don't behave consistently. And they're trying, and I get where they're coming from on that. I understand where they're seeing is like, okay, lunges are different than movement abilities like a dash or something. So therefore they should be treated differently, right? Like there should be some uniqueness there. But the problem is that creates this inconsistent feel of mobility where people with certain mobility are going to be inherently stronger than other ones. So that's what needs to be really dealt with, is there needs to be consistency within the system.
One thing I just realized, I think a lot of the things like this, and you know, going back to even like the poison versus burn discussion, it feels like Motiga is building a large game. Like, they're building a game for the future. And, like, this is actually something that's come up, like, I don't know if I mentioned this on a show, but, like, my full-time job is I do quality assurance work for, like, programming development, essentially. And one of the mantras that I was told at one point is, it's possible to build a system that's too much scaled for the future. Right? Like, at some point, you've built a system that's like, yeah, like, this will work when we're, you know, a $3 billion company that supports, like, 14 million clients. But, like, right now, we're paying, like, way too much money to support all of this extra stuff that isn't being used. And I think, like, Motiga is kind of in the same way, where they've created, like, okay, so we've got, like, the difference between, like, a dash, a lunge, a leap, flying, and, like, they all behave differently. And, like, they all interact differently with different other things. And, like, cripples do things, and slows do things, and grounded is a thing. And, like, they're all... It's, like... no one applies the same status effects, which would like work if you're a game like, League of Legends, where you've got 150 some odd heroes. That it's like, okay, 5 people have a slow, and 12 people have a daze, and 20 people have a stun. But now it's like 1 each, and like it's impossible to keep in your mind which things interact with which other things in what way, and whether or not some of those are even intentional. It's like we could have been okay if we just stuck with like there's slows and stuns and jumps, and that's it.
Yeah.
But instead we built a system that's like meant for having like 500 heroes, and we only have 20.
Yeah, to, however, rein in this conversation, because we are actually already over time on our show, there are obviously still things that need to be worked on in just some basic core things. Like, mobility and CC have a very strange feel right now. And when it comes to how they interact with the map, verticality, and just general movement in general, there's some things that need to become more consistent across the board. Because if you're going to make a system where people have lunges and teleports and jumps and all these and dash abilities, and they're all different, they all get treated differently, but you only have 16 playable heroes, then you're going to have a problem. Because now this one hero is broken because his movement ability is a lunge, and this one hero is worthless because their ability is a dash.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, if there were more, I agree with you, Perry. It would be less of a problem. But right now, it's not. So let's simplify the system. Dashes, lunges, they're all the same thing. They should all get affected the same way. Period. But that is going to be it for us today, guys. We're going to have more of this conversation later. But if you have your own things you kind of want to say on this topic and you want to add to the discussion, feel free. I mean, you can email us that's bullrush@ggunleashed.com. That will email to both me and Perry. We can kind of talk about that on our own. Maybe we can go ahead and create like a forum discussion board on the GGU forums for each show if you want to do after talk, and more discussion there.
That's a good idea.
That is a good idea. You can go ahead and follow us at each of our different Twitters. There's @GGUnleashed or GG_Unleashed. Anyway, we have @NoirBot, @Wolfman, and @Schmooglydorf. You can follow us there for our own individual goings-on and what we do. You can also email each individual one of us at our GG Unleashed emails. That's NoirBot, Schmooglydorf, and Wolfman @ggunleashed.com for emailing directly to us. We would love to see those. We have these email accounts, and I've got literally nothing in my inbox right now. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Sign them up for cat facts.
Yeah, sign me up for cat. No, don't. I will kill you, actually. I will find where you live. But that is pretty much gonna be it, guys, for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're gonna host out somebody in the Gigantic Scape right now. In the future, we're going to be planning on doing like an after hours or a late night show of us just playing the game. We still have yet to figure out when we do that, but we'll see. Who's on right now? I want to raid Kitten Laser because Kitten Laser's an awesome guy, so we're going to go ahead and raid him. But thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, we will see you next time.
See you.